guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel in a slightly different setting and with a tripod. Love it. Today I'm going to be sharing with you how I prepare Shakespeare text when I'm preparing for an audition. Now, I'm not a Shakespeare expert by any means. I did do Shakespeare in drama school and I have done classical text before, but I don't get seen for Shakespeare auditions very often, so when I do have one come around, I really do need to prepare for them because Shakespeare is difficult. The language is hard to navigate sometimes. So these are just some exercises that I've discovered along the way that really help me and might help you too if you need to prepare for drama school auditions or anything like that. So for this video I have printed off an extract from Coriolanus. This is just a short speech from Act 1 Scene 1. I've never prepared this speech before, so I'm just gonna work through it as I explain to you what I do, just so you can see how I prepare this text. So let's get to it. The first thing that you do is read this out loud, at least once, preferably twice. This is not to try and act it or anything like that, it's literally just to read it out loud. Step number 2, after you've read it once or twice out loud, is to mark out the iambic pentameter. So in case you don't know what iambic pentameter is the rhythm that Shakespearean verse is written in, and it goes dee-dum, 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 dee-dum. Probably remember that from English. So oldie but a goodie. Iambs is just the dee-dum rhythm, so English itself is very iambic. It sounds way more fancy than it is. Pentameter just means there's 5 iambs in each line. So what you're going to do is you're going to go through your text and you're going to mark out the iambic pentameter by putting a dot over an unstressed syllable or a D and a U shape over a stressed syllable or a dum. I'm going to do that off camera because that's going to be really boring for you to watch, so I'm going to do that with this text now and then I'm going to come back and show you what that should look like. And we're back. If you hear any random noises in the background, that's because my boyfriend is now behind the camera. Hi, he's working. So I have marked out the iambic pentameter. I do not know if you can see, so I'm just going to hold that really close. Once you've annotated it, that's what it should look like. Now at the bottom, you can see I've put a little asterisk next to that line. I'm actually not sure if I'm right about this. Again, there's still quite a lot of intuition with doing phase 1 of preparation. So the last line says, when you curse them as enemies. Naturally, I think you'd go, when you curse them as enemies. So I think Shakespeare's breaking the iambic pentameter there, which sometimes he does. For example, the famous line from Romeo and Juliet, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? That's not in iambic pentameter. Shakespeare has obviously broken the iambic pentameter because the rest of the speech is more or less using that rhythm. So if you have a line that you're pretty sure breaks the iambic pentameter, you just mark it with an asterisk. Or however you want to mark it, I do it with an asterisk. And the reason you do that is 1, you then know that it's breaking the rhythm, so when you get to putting the text on its feet, it doesn't catch you by surprise. And 2, when you come to making acting choices, you can use the breaks in iambic pentameter to help inform what that choice is. Is it their frustration that's stopping the character from speaking as eloquently as they want? Is it like a big piece of news that's causing that to jar? Are they being really contemplative and that's causing it to jar? So it's very useful to know when that breaks. So that is step 1/2 if you don't count reading it through. That kind of rhymed. Please don't knock the tripod.
I'm not gonna knock the tripod.
I'm scared he's gonna knock the tripod. The next step is to mark out the punctuation, and I do this using dashes. So if it's the end of a sentence, so a full stop, an exclamation mark, or a question mark, I do 2 dashes, and that's to help mark out when it's the end of a completed thought. If it's any other form of punctuation, so commas, brackets, colons, semicolons, dashes, speech marks, I do that with 1 dash because it's just part of a complete thought. It's a clause, essentially. So yeah, so I'm going to mark the punctuation off camera now, and then I will be back in a second. So this is what my text now looks like. As you can see, I've put the dashes in the right place. Now, the first thing I noticed doing this off camera is how long the thoughts are. In these lines, which I know I've blown it up to give myself time to annotate, space to annotate it, but it's not actually that long a speech. There are only 3 completed thoughts. So that's, as an actor, useful to know. Also, if you're looking at longer speeches, it's also helpful to see if there are changes in the lengths of thoughts. So a speech might start with quite long thoughts, and then the thoughts get really, really short and then long again. So that's quite useful. And then if you're in a production over a whole play, you might have a character that most of the time has quite long thoughts or quite short thoughts, and then in one scene or one speech that changes. So these are all kind of useful things to know, which when you get to the point of actually acting it out, you can again use to inform your performance. Also, the single dashes, so the number of parts within thoughts, just looking at this, the thoughts are quite broken up. There's lots of different parts to them. So again, we're not dealing with a character that's just doing a massive stream of consciousness with their long thoughts. They're quite methodical and they're quite complex in sentence structure. So again, that's another useful thing to know when it comes to actually looking at the words. That's going to be helpful for me as the actor to be like, okay, so in this moment they're saying this, but then that changes to that, and help break it down to actually make sense of this speech. The next step is to underline all of the important words in each fragment of a thought, so each clause. So I do this in 2 parts. So the first part is the easiest part, and that's to go through and underline each of the words right before a punctuation point. So where you have a punctuation point, the word before it, underline it. So I'm going to do that off camera now. Okay, so I've done that. Now, what I will notice, because it happens quite a lot in this speech, is that, and I'll use the first clause as an example, obviously the word before the punctuation is you, but you can see I've already underlined the word tell. So this is because you want to make sure that the words that you're underlining are the most important. Now obviously I've had to underline you because it is the word immediately before a punctuation mark. But in terms of understanding the gist of that clause, you is not an important word. Tell is more important. So what you do, if you have a word like you or it or them, basically any pronoun or things like with, kind of connecting words, you underline that word and then go back till you find the most important word and underline the whole thing from the first important word back to the word before the punctuation. So another example that's maybe a little bit clearer. So there's a fragment here that says, and your knees to them. And let's see if I can get it onto camera. Yeah. Yes, your knees to them. Sorry, it's flipped around, so I can't tell if I'm pointing at the right place. But at the beginning of that line, your knees to them. So them is not an important word because it's a pronoun. To is a connecting word, so that's not important. Knees is important because it is a noun. So I've underlined all of those words as like the thought or the word before the punctuation. So that whole idea is kind of where that clause is heading to, and therefore is important and therefore needs to be underlined. I hope that makes sense. So phase 2 of this exercise is then to go through each clause and underline all of the important words, not just the words before the end of the sentence. So again, off camera, I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I've just done that. That was actually quite difficult. This is kind of a hard speech. I'm still struggling to make full sense of it, but I'm getting there. So as you can see, a lot more words are underlined. The way you can tell that you've underlined the most important words is if you can just say the words you've underlined and make basic sense of what the person's talking about. So for example, I'll just use this middle bit here. The whole clause in full says, you may as well strike at the heaven with your staves as lift them against the Roman state. The words I've underlined are strike, heaven, staves, lift, Roman state. You can get a basic idea of like what the whole clause means just by saying the words I've underlined. Hopefully. You may disagree with me. Again, this is quite a subjective exercise, but that's what you're aiming for. The one thing that you shouldn't underline is negatives. So in that clause I've just done, I didn't underline the word against. Still not sure about that, but I decided not to. There are clearer ones, so there's a section, this is several clauses, but I'll just say the whole thing, otherwise it will not make sense. So there's a bunch of clauses that say, and your knees to them, not arms, must help. I haven't underlined the not in not arms because it's a negative. The reason that you don't do that is because, one, as an actor, you're naturally going to give emphasis to negatives in your performance. So you don't have to consciously be like, that's an important word, I must emphasize it to make sure the audience get it. Both you as the actor performing it when it gets to performance and the audience listening and watching are going to pick up the negatives without you having to consciously give them weight and give them emphasis. The other reason that you don't have to underline them is that they're not actually that important to getting the gist of what's going on. Yes, they are the difference between something happening and not happening, but in terms of figuring out what the person is actually talking about, they're not actually that essential. So we're on to the final step of what I do just to prepare text before going into any acting stuff, and that is to mark out the verbs and the nouns in the text. So I always start with verbs because they're the most important words in the text. They're literally what is happening in the text, and I do those with square brackets. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I have square bracketed all of the verbs. Hopefully you can see. So now I'm going to mark out the nouns with curved brackets. And with the nouns, again, pronouns are not important. You don't need to mark those. So we're just looking at proper nouns. Also, one thing that I haven't marked out is the adverbs, so words that are describing the verbs, and now I'm not going to do adjectives, which are words that describe the nouns. Hopefully these things should have been underlined in the previous exercise because they are important, but just for simplicity and clarity, I'm only going to bracket the actual nouns, and I've only bracketed the actual verbs. I'm going to finish that off camera now. Alrighty, so that is my final annotated speech. Now, one thing that you may notice is that the majority of the time, not all the time, but the majority of the time, the words that I've bracketed, so the verbs and nouns, are also words that I underlined in the underlining exercises, and also tend to fall on stressed syllables of the iambic pentameter, which is what you'd expect. Again, it won't happen with every single word, every single verb, every single noun, but by and large, that's what's going to happen. And the ones that it does happen to indicate, by and large, what the most important words are. The most important thing to take out of doing these exercises is not to fight against what's on the page. It can be very difficult, especially if you're used to more contemporary text where there's a lot more freedom. It can be very difficult to stay within the constrictions of the iambic pentameter, of the rhythm, of the meter. But it actually is there to help you. Once you understand where it is and where it breaks, it's actually very, very useful in figuring out what's going on with this really flowery language, because we're not used to talking in this language. We're not used to thoughts being as long as they are in Shakespeare. So breaking it down like this, for me anyway, it just helps break it down and bring it down to its most important things, so you're not confused by sentence structure and things like that. So this definitely helps me. And then from this, now I actually understand what's going on. If I were to prepare the speech to perform or for an audition, I can then look at, so what is actually happening in the play? What are the given circumstances? Who is this guy? What kind of character is he? What's his opinion of the people he's talking to? What's his opinion of himself? And all of that standard actor stuff. So those are the exercises I use when first looking at and preparing a text to perform or audition with. I really hope that you found that useful. If you did, please like this video, I guess. That's what people do on YouTube now. They ask people to like videos. To be fair, I'm so bad at YouTubing. I should be getting you to like and click the bell. Yes, smash subscribe, guys. I mean, I do these for fun. If you want to watch them. Tell your friends if you think they're cool. If not, it's fine. It's cool. Just like talking into cameras in my spare time. I really hope you like this video. If you want more videos like this about how to prepare text or songs or anything like that, then leave a comment below. Or if you want to see any other kinds of videos, leave them in the comments below. I upload these videos on the last Friday of every month, so if you really like them, that's when you can find them. Also, you can like and subscribe if you want to, you know, just find out about them without having to remember last Friday of every month. And yeah, I guess I will talk to you guys next month with my next video, whatever that may be. See you soon. Bye!